Hey YouTube, it's Iron Touch 341. Many people know of Roswell's UFO in Area 51, but not much is explained about Pennsylvania's own Roswell, known as Kecksburg. Kecksburg is an unincorporated community in Mount Pleasant Township, Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania. It is located along Pennsylvania State Route 982 in a heavily wooded area about 30 miles southeast of Pittsburgh at an elevation of 1,209 feet. It rests its fair town against the Chestnut Ridge that separates Acme, Donegal with Kecksburg and Mammoth Park. Kecksburg has a history, a past so puzzling that many residents here have been looking for answers by the U.S. government about this phenomenon. Since many questions remain, one person may ask, what happened? When did this happen? Well, let's get in the DeLorean here, and we'll go back through history to a time when the Vietnam War was still going on. When tensions between the Soviet Union and the United States were at their highest, this time machine is set for December 9th, 1965. Before we go back to 1965, Marty, we have to understand what a UFO is and how long this phenomenon has been known throughout the world. Unexplained aerial observations have been reported throughout history. Some were undoubtedly astronomical in nature: comets, bright meteors, one or more of the 5 planets that could be seen with the naked eye, planetary conjunctions, atmospheric optical phenomenon such as lenticular clouds. An example of Halley's Comet, which was recorded first by the Chinese astronomers in 240 BC and is possibly as early as 467 BC. Such sightings throughout history have often been treated as supernatural portents, angels, and other religious omens. Some current-day UFO researchers have noticed similarities between these religious symbols in medieval paintings and UFO reports, though the canonical symbolic character of such images is documented by art historians, placing more conventional religious interpretations on such images. And on January 25th, 1878, the Denison Daily News printed an article in which John Martin, a local farmer, had reported seeing a large, dark circular object resembling a balloon flying at incredible speed. Martin, according to the newspaper account, said it appeared to be about the size of a saucer, the first known word of the use saucer, which was often described in his mind as a dinner plate. Something with that shape became now common with an association of a UFO. In April 1897, thousands of people reported seeing airships in various parts of the United States resembling large dinner plates-like shapes. These signed affidavits. Scores of people even reported talking to some of the pilots. But on February 28, 1904, there was a sighting by 3 crew members on the USS Supply, 300 miles west of San Francisco. For those of you outside the United States, that is roughly 483 kilometers. It was reported by Lieutenant Frank Schofield, later who became Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Battle Fleet. Schofield wrote of the 3 bright red egg-shaped circular objects flying in echelon formation that approached beneath the cloud layer and then changed course and soared above the clouds, departing directly away from the Earth after 2 to 3 minutes. The largest had the apparent size of about 6 suns, and he said the earliest known pilot UFO sightings of 1,305 similar sightings cataloged by NARCARP took place in 1916 and 1926. On January 31st, 1916, a pilot from the British Empire near Rochefort reported seeing rows of lights resembling lighting windows on a railway carriage that rose and disappeared. And on January 26th, a pilot reported 6 flying manhole covers between Wichita, Kansas and Colorado Springs, Colorado, in late September 1926. An airmail pilot over Nevada said that he had forced to land by a huge wingless cylindrical object. On August 5th, 1926, while traveling the Humboldt Mountains west of Tibet's Kokonor region, Russian explorer Nicholas Roerich reported members of his expedition saw something big and shiny, reflecting the sun, like a huge oval moving at incredible speed. Crossing the camp, things have changed in its direction from south to southwest, and they saw how it disappeared in the intense blue sky. They even saw it They even had time to take their field glasses and saw a distinctly oval form with shiny surface, one side of which was brilliant as the sun. Another description by Rourke was one of a shiny body flying from north to south. Field glasses are at hand, and is a huge body. One side glows in the sun, and it's oval in shape, and then somehow turns in another direction and disappears in the southwest almost in an instant. Also in the Pacific and European theaters during World War II, Foo Fighters, which became known as metallic spheres and balls of light and other shapes that followed aircraft, were reported by many pilots during the war, and on occasion photographed by Allied and Axis powers. Both powers proposed that these phenomenons were conducted by each of this person's and Allies' respective powers. But some proposed Allied explanations at the time, including St. Elmo's fire, the planet Venus, hallucinations from oxygen deprivation, or German secret weapons. The Axis powers thought this was an elaborate Allied hoax and deception in order to lure Axis ships and planes off their deviated courses. In 1946, more than 2,000 reports were collected, and primarily by the Swedish military, of unidentified aerial objects over the Scandinavian nations, along with isolated reports from France, Portugal, Italy, and Greece. These objects were referred to as Russian hail and later known as ghost rockets, because it was thought that the mysterious objects were probably Russian tests of captured German V-1 and V-2 rockets. Although most of these were thought to be such natural phenomenon as meteors or comet fragments, more than 2,000 were tracked on radar by the Swedish military and deemed to be real physical objects. In 1948, a secret document entails Swedish authorities advised the U.S. Air Force in Europe that some of their investigators believed these craft to be extraterrestrial in origin. However, in Scandinavia alone, UFOs have been seen throughout its history, especially during the time of Vikings. And these phenomena during the time of Vikings would be used to be signs of omens that let the Vikings know if it was time to raid. As you can tell, history is filled with unidentified flying objects that have been recorded throughout history. But on December 9th, 1965, this incident gained national headlines, and it put Kecksburg on the map when it became known as Pennsylvania's Roswell. On that day, it was a very cold night in rural Kecksburg. Farmers and residents were huddled inside their homes, keeping warm on that cold night. Then, later during the night, a large boom rattled homes in Kecksburg. Windows were shattered in some areas, and houses were shaken. Some reported that some of their books and lamps fell off with their stands and fell on the floor, which prompted attention from a lot of the people inside their homes. Outside, a large, brilliant fireball streaked across the night sky, which was seen by thousands in at least 6 U.S. states and Ontario, Canada alone. It streaked over Detroit, Michigan, Windsor, Canada area, and reportedly dropped hot metal debris over Michigan and northern Ohio, starting some grass fires. This object was going several times the speed of sound, and that this object was probably going at least Mach 7 or greater when it reached the atmosphere. But it was generally assumed and reported by the press to be a meteor, after authorities discounted other proposed explanations such as a plane crash, a failed missile test, or re-entering satellite debris. However, in Kecksburg, eyewitnesses in the small village just about 30 miles southeast of Pittsburgh claimed that something crashed in the woods. A boy ran to that object and he saw it land, and his mother saw a wisp of blue smoke arising from the woods. When she called authorities, military personnel swarmed the area looking for this object. Another person who saw this object felt a vibration and felt a thump about the time when the object reportedly landed. Others from Kecksburg, including local volunteer fire department members, reporting finding an object in the shape of an acorn about as large as a Volkswagen Beetle at the time, writing which resembled Egyptian hieroglyphs, which was said to be in a band around the base of the object. Witnesses reported that the intense military presence, most notably the U.S. Army, secured the area, ordered civilians out, and anyone who stayed behind would have been arrested on the spot and detained. When the U.S. Army found the object and secured it. They removed it from where it landed and put it on a flatbed truck covered in a large black tarp and drove away. The U.S. military later on claimed that they searched the woods and found absolutely nothing, and has reported to the press that nothing was found. But a reporter for the local news station known as WHJB, which is now known as 107.1 WHJB in Greensburg, John Murphy, arrived at the scene of the events before the authorities had arrived, and in response to several calls to the station from alarmed citizens, he took several photographs and conducted interviews with witnesses. His former wife, Bonnie Misselig, later reported that all but one of the rolls were filmed were confiscated by the U.S. military personnel. WHGB office manager Mabel Mazza described one of the pictures. It was very dark, and it was with a lot of trees around, and you could barely see what was there, but he didn't know how far away the site he was, but he did see a picture of sort of a cone-like shape craft, and it was the only time he would ever see it. But in the following weeks, Murphy became enveloped with an incident and wrote a radio documentary called The Object in the Woods, featuring his experience and interviews he had conducted that night. Shortly before the documentary was scheduled to have aired, he received an unexpected visit at the station from two men in black suits, identifying themselves as government officials. These real-life men in black requested to speak with him in a back room behind closed doors. This meeting had lasted 30 minutes and included interrogation and extreme pressure from government officials to tell John Murphy to keep quiet about what he saw. As speculated by officials in the area, believed that John Murphy was threatened with silence. After the meeting was over, an agitated Murphy aired a censored version of the documentary, which he claimed in its introduction had to be edited due to some interviewees requesting their statements be removed from the broadcast in fear of getting in trouble with the police or the army. Government organizations had informed people who have seen this to keep quiet about their encounter. The new version contained nothing revealing. It did not mention an object at all. Mazza and also Murphy's wife remember the aired documentary was entirely different from what Murphy had originally written. Due to the government officials pressing on John Murphy to cancel his documentary and to stop and cease and desist all investigations on the matter subject at hand. However, after airing the documentary, which was not originally what he was going to write, Murphy became uncharacteristically despondent and completely stopped all investigation on the case. He refused to talk to anyone about it ever again, but he never gave any clear reasons why. In February of 1969, John Murphy was struck and killed by an unidentified car in an apparent hit and run while crossing a road. This hit and run occurred near Ventura, California, while Murphy was on vacation. Some have speculated that government agents assassinated Murphy for his story after he was told to retract it and edit it to make it seem like he did not know anything about the object. Later on, the Tribune Review from nearby Greensburg, which had a reporter at the scene, ran an article the next morning. Identified flying object falls near Kecksburg, Army ropes-off area. The article continued, the area which the object landed was immediately sealed off on the order of the U.S. Army and state police officials, reportedly in anticipation of a close inspection of what may have fallen. State police officials there ordered the area roped off and to await the expected arrival of both U.S. military Army Corps of Engineers and possibly U.S. civilian scientists employed by the U.S. government. However, a later edition of the paper stated that nothing had been found after authorities searched the area. The official explanation of the widely seen fireball was that it was a mid-sized meteor, but in 2003, the Sci-Fi Channel sponsored a scientific study of the area and related records by the Coalition for Freedom of Information. The most significant finding of the scientific team was a line of damaged trees, broken at the top, leading to the site of where the eyewitness said they saw the object embedded in the soil along with associated fresh tree damage. Furthermore, the tree core samples dated to the damage to 1965, and this provided physical evidence that something airborne may have come crashing through the trees and landed in the woods. However, one of the scientists instead suggested ice damage to the trees. Some minor disturbance in the soil was also found at the alleged landing site. Another witness reported hearing a pair of loud, horrific screams. There was, however, a push for NASA to release pertinent documents on the subject. Some 40 pages of these documents were released on November 1st, 2003, but these documents were unrevealing. None had speculated any kind of evidence to show extraterrestrials that crash land in Kecksburg. However, there was an Air Force object, Project Blue Book, that's documents indicating that a 3-man team was sent from an Air Force radar installation near Pittsburgh to investigate the Kecksburg crash. Newspaper articles at the time reported this, but Project Blue Book stated nothing had been found. However, speculation as to identify the Kecksburg object ranged from an alien craft to debris from a satellite or from Cosmos 96, a Soviet space probe intended for Venus but failed and never left the Earth's atmosphere. Similarities have been drawn between the Kecksburg incident and the Roswell UFO incident, leading to the former to be referred to as Pennsylvania's Roswell. The documentary on the Discovery Channel in 2008 series Nazi UFO Conspiracy looked at the links between the Kecksburg object and the alleged Nazi UFO called the Die Glocke, which translates from the German word as the bell. Claims made by Joseph A. Farrell in 2009. The History Channel's program, also UFO Hunters, revisited this incident along with similar ones that happened in Needles, California. They interviewed witnesses, used scientific equipment not available in 2003's Sci-Fi Channel investigation. They claimed to have found no further information other than what was previously been discovered. The main theme of the program was of a military major presence and cover-up. Further investigation by the History Channel's Ancient Aliens in 2011 proposes that the craft was found to be the Die Glocke, or as known in German as the bell. The program investigates evidence and speculation that Nazi SS officer Hans Kammler may have used the Die Glocke as means of escaping Allied forces during the final days before VE Day via time travel, and ended up crash landing in Kecksburg and somehow possibly integrated himself in post-war American society. In an episode of the Science Channel series Dark Matters, investigated several well-known theories. One was the alleged connection of the Kecksburg incident to Nazi research into anti-gravity technology, specifically the Die Glocke. In 2015, researcher Owen Eichler identified an object as the General Electric Mark II re-entry vehicle. The object may have been a failed launch attempt of a re-entry from a launch at a previous time. Also, Eichler proposed a re-entry vehicle that may have been coupled with a secondary booster engine, explaining the full control of the vehicle from a flight to landing, and also the secondary booster may have had polysulfide compound manufactured by Tholicoal counting for the strong odor of sulfur at the crash site. In 2005, just before the 40th anniversary of the Kecksburg crash, NASA released a statement to the effect that they had examined metallic fragments from the object, and now claiming that it was from a re-entering Russian satellite. This changed story was proven by the spokesman claiming that the related records had been misplaced, and according to the Associated Press story done by David States, as quoted from saying, this object appeared to be a Russian satellite that re-entered the atmosphere and broke up. NASA experts studied the fragments from the object, but what records that they have found were lost in the 1990s. As a rule, they state that they don't track UFOs, not even on their deep space radar telemetry system. But what they could do, and what they apparently did, as the experts in the spacecraft in the 1960s, was to take a look at whatever it was and give their expert explanation and opinion. They did that, and they boxed the case up, and that was the end of it. Unfortunately, the documents supporting those findings were misplaced and lost forever. Furthermore, the claim contradicts what journalist Leslie Kean was told in 2003 by Nicholas L. Johnson, NASA's chief scientist for orbital debris. As part of the new Sci-Fi Channel investigation, Kean had John recheck the orbital paths of all known satellites and records of the periods in 1965. Johnson told Kean that orbital mechanics made it absolutely impossible for any part of Cosmo 96 Venus probe of USSR origin to have accounted for either the fireball or any object from Kecksburg. Johnson also stated there were no other man-made satellites or other objects that had re-entered the atmosphere on that day. Their flight paths placed it nowhere near Kecksburg in 1965. Kean and others deemed it highly questionable that NASA could actually lose such records. However, This would not be a unique case for NASA. For example, the original tapes recorded during the televised 11 Apollo moon landing were misplaced or reused, and in December 2005, a lawsuit was filed to get NASA to search more diligently for the lost records. And on October 26, 2007, NASA agreed to research and look for these records after being ordered by the court to do so. The judge, who had tried to move NASA along for more than 3 years, angrily referred to NASA's previous search efforts as a ball of yarn, but never fully answered for the request, adding, "I can sense the plaintiff's frustration because I am frustrated." During the hearing, Steve McConnell, NASA's public liaison officer, admitted 2 boxes of papers from the time of the Kecksburg incident were missing. Stan Gordon, principal investigator of the Kecksburg incident for several decades, stated that "I have no doubt the government knows a lot more what's been going on and what has then been revealed to the public." In 2008, space writer James Oberg opinioned that NASA was unlikely to possess any such documents since, in his view, it was highly likely that the supposed NASA team that investigated the site were, in fact, United States Air Force personnel who identified the object themselves as NASA personnel, something regularly done by military personnel in civilian clothes during the 1960s. In 2009, in November, Leslie Kean filed a report on the results of the NASA research. Documents were still missing and reported destroyed, and little of interest was turned up relevant to the Kecksburg case. Of particular interest was the missing box of fragmentology files, quote-unquote, reported outside the perimeters of the search, deliberately concealed records, and perhaps still classified. Files removed by NASA employees but were never returned. Was one such individual was named that files were indeed destroyed as reported, and that archivists unfamiliar with what was being searched for. In addition, the plaintiffs had to trust that NASA carried out the search as they reported to the court, since the plaintiffs were not allowed to examine the search materials for themselves. Despite reservations about the thoroughness or accuracy of the search, Kean said they felt that they had been exhausted in their legal remedies and ended the lawsuit against NASA. Kean noted that some of the items of interest did turn up, such as NASA's general involvement in collecting space debris and analyzing it, including interest in sightings of lesser-known meteor fireball fragments seen around the same time. In addition, NASA sent out press releases to news agencies about these other fireballs, but NASA had nothing on the widely known reported seen fireball associated with the Kecksburg case, and issued no stories on it. Kean also wrote that she tried to get information from Stites, the NASA spokesperson who issued a surprising statement in 2005 that NASA had indeed examined debris related to Kecksburg, supposedly from a Russian space probe. However, Stites never responded, and Kean was particularly interested in Stites' source of information to make such a statement, since he also indicated there was no surviving records, and the court-ordered search also turned up no relevant records. There are also no records of eyewitness saying they had chipped off pieces of the artifact, according to Stites' account. Even though Kean did not believe this, she continued on and created a documentary and a book about the incident. She is known as an investigative journalist and author of the New York Times bestseller, UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Who Go on the Record. Her work has been published nationally and internationally as well. To this day, however, many residents in the area, as well as many conspiracy theorists, believe that if aliens did not crash in Kecksburg, then something else is definitely going on. Some have speculated that NASA's Project Bluebeam is to blame, although this may be unlikely, and most residents dismiss that idea. Others point to the German SS time capsule Die Glocke, also known as the Bell. As interesting as it sounds, of all the theories, the Die Glocke is the one that is most plausible. However, time travel is extremely difficult, but it is not impossible. Traveling to the future is actually fairly simple compared to the alternative. Traveling to the past is almost impossible. In order to travel to the future, all one must do is to accelerate themselves to as close to the speed of light as possible. Doing so would create a time dilation in the bubble, where the person inside the bubble would experience time slower than those outside the bubble, as he would travel faster than the speed of those outside the bubble. But, thus explaining that the German officer who flew the capsule attempted to test fly the Die Glocke during VE Day to escape Allied forces. Government authorities and scientists have dismissed this hypothesis as bogus. Whatever the case, the phenomenon of the Kecksburg UFO will remain in the minds of residents to years to come. A feature-length documentary film is being developed by Cody Knotts and stars Anthony Roth, Kurt Woontoon, who is known for his Pittsburgh Dad series, Maria Olsen, as well as many more individuals. Kecksburg was also featured on the pulp culture series such as Star Trek on more than one occasion. One such occasion was the episode Carbon Creek on the Star Trek series Enterprise, which gives a spiritual and honorable nod to Kecksburg, despite the episode taking place in 1957 in a fictional town called Carbon Creek, Pennsylvania. It is curious that they didn't use the name Kecksburg, let alone the scenes of the town. But the theme is still familiar to many residents, and every year during the summer, festivals take place in Kecksburg to honor the UFO that crashed in the vicinity of Kecksburg. These festivals have carnival rides, games, food, flea markets, speakers, and many more. Such prominent speakers contain the likes of those who witnessed the event, as well as investigative journalists who have investigated this incident. In 2015, Kecksburg celebrated the 50th anniversary of the UFO incident, and to this day, it has yet to be unclassified and solved. So, what are your thoughts on the Kecksburg incident? What do you think happened? Was it a meteor? A German SS time capsule? The Glock? Was it aliens? Let me know in the comments below. What do you believe? Thank you for watching, and thank you for subscribing. If you haven't done so, please subscribe to my channel for future documentaries. But as always, thanks for watching.